Jake stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 50,000 ghosts pressing against his shoulders. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 200 species. Crystal walls rose 300 feet high, and holographic displays floated everywhere, showing star charts and diplomatic documents. He had given speeches here for 20 years. He had argued for trade agreements, defended human colonies, and smiled through insults that would have started wars on Earth. Today was different. Today he was done smiling. "Ambassador, you may present Earth's position on the border dispute," Speaker said from his elevated platform. The elder had skin like gray stone and eyes that glowed with a soft blue light. He spoke the way professors talk to slow students, patient but bored. Jake touched the control pad on his wrist. The holographic displays throughout the chamber flickered and changed. Now they showed a ship, the New Hope, a civilian colony vessel, one of the big ones that carried entire communities to new worlds. This one had been carrying 50,000 people to establish a settlement in the outer reach. "I'm not here to discuss border disputes," Jake said. His voice was calm, but something in his tone made several ambassadors sit up. "I'm here to discuss murder." The chamber went quiet. Its glow dimmed slightly. "Ambassador, if you have a formal complaint, you must submit it through proper channels." "I did 3 months ago. I submitted it to the Security Council, the Ethics Committee, and the Office of Relations. I received forms in response. Forms acknowledging receipt of my forms." Jake expanded the hologram. Now it showed the New Hope's final hours. The ship hung in space near a nebula, its engines dark. Distress signals pulsed from it in waves, broadcasting on every emergency frequency. The timestamp showed they had been sending those signals for 6 hours. "The New Hope suffered a catastrophic engine failure while passing through neutral space," Jake continued. "They sent distress calls immediately. At the time of their first call, the Third Fleet was 2 hours away. The Border Patrol was 90 minutes away. The trade convoy was 4 hours away." He looked around the chamber. Many ambassadors were watching their data pads, not even paying attention. Others whispered to their aides. This was routine to them. Another human complaint. Another emotional outburst from the newcomers who didn't understand how the galaxy worked. Jake changed the display again. Now it showed 3 fleet positions, all within easy range of the New Hope, all moving away or holding position. None responding to the distress call. "Earth's nearest military vessels were 4 days away. We diverted them immediately. They burned their engines past safety limits to get there faster." His voice remained steady, but his hands clenched at his sides. Found the New Hope first." The chamber was a bit quieter now. A few more ambassadors were paying attention. They were known to everyone, pirates, slavers, and worse. They had been raiding the frontier for decades, and the Council had done nothing effective to stop them. Jake didn't need to explain what they did to helpless ships. Everyone knew, but he showed them anyway. The hologram displayed the wreckage that Earth ships had found. The New Hope torn open like a gutted fish. Escape pods destroyed before they could launch. Life support sections vented to space. They hadn't just killed, they had taken their time. 50,000 human civilians, Jake said quietly. 12,000 of them were children under the age of 10. The youngest was 6 weeks old. Her name was Emma Grant. Her parents had spent 3 years saving money for the colony permits. He pulled up the passenger manifest. 50,000 names scrolled through the air, too fast to read, but the sheer number of them filled the chamber. Then he slowed it down to show just the children. 12,000 names, each with a small photo. Faces smiling at cameras, excited about their new home among the stars. Ambassador Lyra of the delegation stood up. She was tall and thin, with silver skin and large, dark eyes. "Ambassador, this is a tragedy. We all grieve for your loss. The Council will launch a full investigation into why the distress calls were not answered." "Sit down," Jake said. Lyra blinked. In 20 years, Jake had never been rude to her. They had been friends, or at least he had thought so. They had shared meals, discussed philosophy, worked together on trade agreements. "Sit down," he repeated, and this time his voice carried through the chamber like a whip crack. "I'm not finished." Lyra sat slowly, her expression confused. Jake pulled up communication logs. "I have the recordings of the distress calls. The New Hope broadcast for 6 hours before they arrived. Their transmissions were received and acknowledged by automated systems on 47 Council vessels. Acknowledged. That means your computers heard them screaming for help and logged it in a database. He played the audio, a woman's voice trying to stay calm but failing. This is the new hope. We have a critical engine failure and life support is failing. We have 50,000 souls on board, including 12,000 children. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need immediate assistance. Our position is. The message repeated, growing more desperate each time. By the final transmission, the woman was crying. Please, there are children here. Bobbies, please help us. Is anyone listening? The chamber was completely silent now. Even had stopped glowing. You were listening, Jake said. Your ships heard every word. They chose not to respond. And when I submitted formal complaints, I received forms. When I requested emergency council sessions, I was told to wait for the next scheduled meeting. When I demanded answers, I was told that ship movements are classified and that the council does not explain operational decisions to individual member species. He took a step forward. So let me explain something to you. Earth is done asking for explanations. We are done submitting forms. We are done being the patient newcomers who smile and accept that our children's lives don't matter as much as your security classifications. President Helen Carter's hologram flickered to life beside him. She wore a simple black suit, and her face was carved from granite. Effective immediately, Earth is withdrawing from all Galactic Council diplomatic activities. We are recalling every ambassador, every liaison, every diplomatic officer. We are closing our embassies and terminating all cultural exchange programs. The chamber erupted. Ambassadors shouted questions. Aides rushed between seats. Glow flared bright with anger. You cannot simply withdraw, the speaker declared. There are treaties, agreements, trade deals. You have obligations. We fulfilled our obligations, Helen said coldly. We answered every distress call. We shared our technology. We sent aid to disaster zones. We patrolled trade routes at our own expense. And when our people needed help, needed the same community we had given so much to, that community turned away. This is an emotional response, said. You are grieving. Take time to reconsider. We've had 3 months to reconsider, Jake said. We're done. Earth is closing its borders. Any council vessel attempting to enter human space will be turned away. Any council station in human territory has 30 days to evacuate. All joint military operations are terminated. All research partnerships are ended. As of this moment, humanity stands alone. He turned to leave, and the entire human delegation followed him. 23 diplomats who had spent years building relationships, creating connections, fighting for Earth's place in the galactic community. Now they walked out without looking back. Lyra ran after them, her long legs carrying her quickly down the corridor outside the chamber. Jake, wait, please. He stopped but didn't turn around. Why should I? Because your people are making a mistake. The galaxy needs cooperation. We need each other. Now he did turn, and Lyra took a step back from what she saw in his eyes. You needed us to patrol the frontier. You needed us to solve problems you found boring. You needed us to die protecting trade routes while you debated proper committee procedures. But the moment we needed you, we got silence and forms. Not all of us feel that way, Lyra said quietly. Many species value Earth's contributions. Value them enough to save our children? Jake asked. Or just value them enough to accept them when they're convenient? He walked away, and this time Lyra didn't follow. She stood in the empty corridor and watched the human delegation board their shuttle. For 20 years, humans had been the enthusiastic newcomers, eager to learn, quick to help, always pushing for more cooperation and understanding. That was over now, and as Lyra thought about the recordings she had heard, about the woman begging for help while her ship died around her, she felt something cold settle in her chest. The humans weren't wrong to be angry. They were wrong to think isolation was the answer. But they weren't wrong about the reason they were leaving. The council had failed them when it mattered most, and now everyone was going to pay the price. 3 weeks after Jake walked out of the council chamber, Captain Cross stood on the bridge of the UES Vigilant and watched humanity seal itself away from the galaxy. His ship was one of 50 patrolling the new border, and every day brought more evidence that Earth meant every word it had said. Through the main, he could see a transport shuttle leaving the Harmony Research Station. It was the last one. Dr. Lisa Park was on board, along with 300 other human scientists who had been working on projects ranging from stellar cartography to xenobiology. They were all going home. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Station Director Kell. his communications officer said. Lieutenant Sophie Grant was young, only 25, but she had a steady hand. He's asking if we can delay the evacuation by 1 week. They're in the middle of critical experiments. Shook his head. Standard response, Lieutenant. All human personnel are required to return to Earth space immediately. No exceptions, no delays. Sophie transmitted the message, then paused. Sir, Director Kell says the experiments involve curing genetic disorders. If they stop now, 6 months of work will be lost. Then they should have thought about that before they let our children die, said flatly. Send the response. It wasn't fair to Director Kell. The scientist had nothing to do with the New Hope. He had probably never even heard of the ship until humans started leaving. But fair didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the galaxy understood humanity was serious. On Earth, Trade Minister Jun stood in his office and processed reports that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Human merchants were abandoning contracts worth billions. Human engineers were leaving half-finished projects. Human entertainers were canceling shows that had sold out across 20 star systems. The economic damage to the Council was starting to show. Human agricultural techniques had been feeding colony worlds that couldn't grow enough food in their own harsh environments. Human manufacturing had been producing components that other species found too difficult or too expensive to make themselves. Human medical research had been advancing treatments faster than most species could keep up with. Now all of that was stopping, not slowing down, stopping completely. His assistant, a young woman named Kelly Brooks, brought him another stack of reports. Minister, we're receiving hundreds of requests for exemptions. Species saying they need human help for critical infrastructure, medical emergencies, food supplies. What are we telling them? Asked, though he already knew. To direct all requests through official council channels, Kelly said quietly. But there are no official channels anymore. Nodded slowly. He had argued against the withdrawal at first. He had told President Carter that isolation would hurt Earth's economy, that they needed galactic trade to survive. She had looked at him with tired eyes and asked a simple question. What price would he put on the lives of 12,000 children? He hadn't had an answer then. He didn't have one now. His terminal chimed with an incoming call. It was from the Trade Authority, marked urgent. Accepted it, and the face of Minister appeared on the screen. The looked exhausted. Minister, I must speak with you about the medical supply contracts. We have a plague spreading through our outer colonies. Without human pharmaceuticals, we're looking at millions of deaths. I'm sorry to hear that, said genuinely. But Earth is no longer engaged in trade with Council species. This isn't about trade, said desperately. This is about saving lives. Surely you can make an exception for humanitarian reasons. Felt the words like a knife. Like the exception the Council made when the New Hope needed help, that kind of humanitarian reason. His face fell. That was different. That was a military decision, not a trade matter. It was a decision that killed 50,000 of our people, said coldly. And now you're asking us to show the compassion that none of you showed them. The answer is no. Earth is closed. He ended the call before could respond. His hands were shaking. He had just condemned millions to possible death. But if he made exceptions, if humanity showed mercy now, then the galaxy would learn nothing. They would go back to treating human lives as expendable, knowing that humans would always come to help in the end. 4,000 light-years away, Captain Maya Torres of the UES Resolution was learning the same lesson in a much harder way. Her ship was on patrol near what used to be Joint Council Human Space when her sensors picked up a distress signal. Captain, we have a civilian transport sending emergency calls, Lieutenant Chris Morgan reported from the tactical station. It's a merchant vessel, 43 souls on board. Their engine just exploded and life support is failing. Maya felt her stomach clench. She knew what her orders were: observe only, no engagement except in self-defense, no assistance to Council vessels under any circumstances. How long do they have? She asked. Chris checked his sensors. 4 hours, maybe less. Their backup systems are failing. Are there any Council ships in range? The nearest one is 6 hours away. Captain, if we don't help them, they're going to die. Maya stared at the sensor display. 43 beings. She pulled up the vessel's registration. It was a family ship. 3 generations traveling together, running cargo between colonies. They probably didn't even know about the New Hope. They were just ordinary people trying to make a living. "Captain," Chris said quietly. She made her decision. "Take us in, prepare rescue operations." The UES Resolution moved toward the dying ship at full speed. Maya's crew worked with smooth efficiency. They had done rescues like this 100 times. It was what Earth ships did. They saved people. They brought all 43 on board. 3 of them were children, small and scared, holding tight to their parents. Maya's medical officer, Dr. Price, treated them for radiation exposure while engineering teams assessed the damage to their ship. "Captain, their engine is completely gone," Chief Engineer Hayes reported. "We can't repair it. We can tow them to the nearest station, but that would take us 3 days out of our patrol zone." Maya looked at the family gathered in her cargo bay. They were watching her with large, grateful eyes. The children had stopped crying. An older, probably the ship's captain, approached her. "Thank you," he said in broken English. "We thought we would die. We sent calls for hours, but no one came. Then your ship appeared like a miracle." Maya felt something twist in her chest. "We're not miracle workers, we're just doing our job." "Your job is to save Council citizens?" they asked, confused. "But I heard humans have closed their borders, that you no longer help Council species." "We don't," Maya said quietly. "But we don't let people die when we can prevent it either. We're going to tow your ship to the nearest Council station. After that, you're on your own." She turned away before he could thank her again. She felt sick. This was exactly what Command had warned about. The moment humans started making exceptions, the moment they showed they were still the same helpful species they had always been, the Council would learn nothing. But what was she supposed to do? Watch children die to prove a point? Back on Earth, President Helen Carter was dealing with the same question on a much larger scale. She stood in a press conference room and faced reporters from every major human news network. Behind her, a display showed the current state of human space: sealed borders, patrol ships on high alert, and a galaxy that was starting to realize humans weren't coming back. "Madam President, there are reports that Council species are suffering because of our withdrawal," a reporter from the Mars Broadcasting Network said. "Medical supplies, food shipments, security patrols. How do you respond to critics who say we're punishing innocent civilians for the Council's mistakes?" Helen had been expecting this question. She had been dreading it. "I respond by asking where those critics were when our civilians needed help. When the New Hope was dying, when children were screaming for anyone to save them, where was the Council's concern for innocent civilians?" "But 2 wrongs don't make a right," another reporter pressed. "If we become like them, if we ignore suffering, haven't they won?" "They haven't won anything," Helen said sharply. "We're not ignoring suffering. We're establishing that human suffering matters just as much as anyone else's. For decades, Earth has been the galaxy's unpaid security force, its free medical service, its emergency responders. We did that gladly because we believed in community, but community is a two-way street." She gestured to the display behind her. "The Council had 3 ships within range of the New Hope. 3. Any one of them could have saved our people. They chose not to. They chose to follow protocols and chains of command while children died. So now they get to see what it's like when we follow the same rules, when we put our own interests first, when we decide that helping others is someone else's problem." "So this is revenge?" a reporter asked. "No," Helen said quietly. "This is education. The galaxy is learning what it's like without us. And when they've learned that lesson, when they truly understand what we brought to the community, then maybe we can talk about coming back. But not before, and not on their terms, never again on their terms." The press conference ended, but the questions didn't. All across Earth, people debated the same issue. Were they doing the right thing? Were they becoming monsters to fight monsters? Or were they simply standing up for themselves after years of being taken for granted? On the bridge of the UES Vigilant, Cross received a report that made his blood run cold. The raiders, emboldened by the absence of human patrols, had hit another convoy. This time it was a colony supply run. 12 ships destroyed, 5,000 dead. That had been one of the species with ships near the New Hope. They had chosen not to respond. Wondered if they were thinking about that choice now. He wondered if 5,000 dead would teach them the value of answering distress calls. He wondered if anyone would learn anything from this, or if the galaxy would just spiral into more violence and death. He looked at the stars beyond his and felt very tired. Humanity had tried to be part of something bigger. They had tried to build bridges and create understanding. And when that failed, when the community they believed in revealed itself to be hollow, they had walked away. Now they were alone, safe behind their borders but alone, and couldn't decide if that was victory or defeat. 6 months after humanity closed its borders, General Price sat in a secure bunker beneath Geneva and watched the galaxy tear itself apart. The holographic display in front of him showed 37 active conflict zones, 22 humanitarian crises, and 15 territorial disputes that were threatening to become full-scale wars. 6 months ago, that number had been 6. General, the latest intelligence reports are coming in from our deep space monitoring stations, Commander Ben said, placing a data tablet on the desk. Ben was 42, career intelligence, and he had the look of a man who hadn't slept properly in weeks. They have expanded their operations into 8 new sectors. Piracy is up 300% across the frontier. Studied the data. The pattern was clear. Everywhere humans used to patrol, everywhere human ships used to respond to distress calls and hunt pirates, there was now chaos. The Council's enforcement fleets were stretched thin, trying to cover territory that used to have human support. They relied on us more than they knew, said quietly. We were the ones doing the actual work while they held meetings and debated procedures. Should we forward this intelligence to the Council? Ben asked. No, we're not part of the Council anymore. Their security is their problem. Closed the report and looked at his intelligence officer. How are our borders? Secure. We've completed the first phase of the autonomous defense network. Any unauthorized vessel trying to enter human space gets one warning, then we escort them out. Force if necessary. Have we had to use force? Twice. Both times were vessels that claimed they didn't receive proper notification of the border closure. We disabled their engines and towed them back to Council space. Nodded slowly. They were testing boundaries, seeing if humanity would actually enforce its isolation. They had their answer now. His terminal chimed. Another call from a Council species requesting help. He didn't even look at it anymore. Minister Wei handled those now, and her answer was always the same. Earth is closed. On the Council, Ambassador Lyra stood in an emergency session and tried to make her fellow Council members understand what was happening. The chamber was half empty. Many species had stopped sending representatives to meetings that accomplished nothing. We are losing control of the frontier, she said, her voice carrying through the massive space. Without human patrols, they have taken over 17 systems. 3 colony worlds have been completely destroyed. Millions are dead. Speaker sat on his elevated platform, and for the first time since Lyra had known him, he looked old. We have our own enforcement fleets. They will handle the situation. They can't, Lyra said flatly. I have the operational reports. Our fleets are designed for large-scale conflicts, not rapid response to pirates and raiders. Humans specialized in that kind of work. They had fast ships, small crews, and they could respond to threats in hours instead of days. We built our entire security strategy around them doing that job, and now they're gone. A delegate stood up. Then perhaps it is time to discuss terms for their return. Surely the humans can be reasoned with. Can they? Lyra pulled up footage from 3 months ago. It showed Captain Maya Torres and the UES Resolution rescuing a merchant vessel. This human captain saved 43 civilians. Then she towed their damaged ship to our nearest station and left without saying another word. I spoke with the family she saved. They said she looked like it hurt her to help them, but she did it anyway because she couldn't watch people die. She changed the image. Now it showed the borders of human space, solid and unmoving. That's who humans are. They can't stop themselves from helping, even when they're angry, even when they've been hurt. But they also won't forget what we did, or rather what we didn't do. The New Hope incident was regrettable, said. But these are matters of procedure and military chain of command. Ships cannot simply respond to every distress call without proper authorization. Lyra felt something snap inside her. She had been holding her temper for 6 months, trying to be diplomatic, trying to find common ground. But she was done. 12,000 children, she said quietly. The youngest was 6 weeks old, and you're talking about procedure. The chamber went silent. Lyra never raised her voice. She was known for being calm, rational, the voice of moderation. But now her large, dark eyes were bright with anger. I pulled the communication logs, she continued. I pulled them all. The Third Fleet received the New Hope's distress call and logged it as low priority because it was a human vessel and humans have their own military. The Border Patrol received it and requested authorization from their command structure, which took 4 hours to respond because the commanding officer was attending a diplomatic dinner. The convoy received it and determined that diverting to help would delay their delivery schedule and cost them penalty fees on their contracts. She looked around the chamber. We had reasons, we had procedures, we had priorities, and 50,000 humans died while we followed our rules. Sklo dimmed. Ambassador, you are out of line. No, Lyra said. I'm finally seeing clearly. We failed them. We failed them in the worst possible way, and now we're paying the price. 4,000 light-years away, Maya Torres sat in her ready room and read a message that made her hands shake. It was from Admiral Richard Hayes, the commander of Earth's Defense Fleet. Captain Torres, it has come to my attention that the UES Resolution responded to a distress call 6 months ago, in direct violation of standing orders. You are hereby ordered to report to Fleet Headquarters for review of your conduct. Maya had known this was coming. She had filed the required reports, documented everything about the rescue. She had followed regulations except for the one that mattered most. She had helped counsel citizens when she was ordered not to. She thought about the children she had saved. They would be teenagers by now, living their lives, going to school, probably not thinking much about the human ship that had pulled them from a dying vessel. They didn't know she might lose her command for saving them. Lieutenant Chris Morgan knocked on her door. Captain, do you have a minute? Come in. Chris entered and stood at attention, but his face was troubled. Captain, the crew knows about the summons. They want you to know they'll all testify on your behalf. What you did was right. What I did was against orders, Maya said quietly. Orders that tell us to watch people die, Chris said. That's not who we are. That's not what Earth trained us to be. No, Maya agreed. But maybe that's what we need to become. Maybe that's the only way the galaxy learns. Chris was quiet for a moment. Captain, I've been thinking about the New Hope a lot. About those 6 hours they spent calling for help. I keep imagining what it was like on that ship. Parents trying to keep their kids calm. Engineers working desperately to fix the engines. Everyone watching the sensors, hoping to see a ship coming to save them. Maya closed her eyes. She had imagined the same thing 1,000 times. And then they arrived, Chris continued. And those people realized no one was coming, that the galaxy they had believed in, the community they had trusted, didn't care enough to save them. What do you think they felt in those last moments? I don't know, Maya whispered. I think they felt abandoned, Chris said. And now we're abandoning everyone else. I understand why. I'm angry too. But Captain, when does it end? When do we stop punishing the galaxy for what the Council did? Maya didn't have an answer. She was still looking for one when Chris left her ready room. She was still looking when her ship's sensors picked up another distress call 3 hours later. This time it was a research vessel, 15 scientists. They had been studying a dangerous nebula when their shields failed. Radiation was flooding their ship. They had maybe 2 hours. Maya stared at the sensor display. They had been one of the species that ignored the New Hope. Their fleet had been closest. They could have saved everyone with time to spare. They had chosen not to. Captain, her bridge crew was watching her, waiting for orders. She thought about Admiral Hayes' summons. She thought about the investigation she was already facing. She thought about regulations and orders and the chain of command. Then she thought about 15 people dying slowly from radiation poisoning while she watched. Take us in, she said. Maximum speed. The UES Resolution turned toward the dying ship, and Maya knew she had just ended her career. But she also knew she would make the same choice 1,000 times over, because the Council had been wrong to let humans die, and she would be just as wrong to let anyone else die when she could prevent it. Maybe that made her a bad soldier. Maybe it made Earth's isolation strategy weaker, but it made her human, and right now that was all she could be. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter stood at a window overlooking the city and felt the weight of billions pressing down on her shoulders. Her aide, Secretary of State, stood beside her with more reports. Madam President, we're receiving increased pressure from multiple sectors. The Agricultural Committee says some of our outer colonies were dependent on Council trade for certain supplies. The Science Council says we're losing access to research that could advance human development by decades. And the military is reporting that our ships are still responding to distress calls despite orders. Helen closed her eyes. How many ships? 7 confirmed incidents. Captain Tor's is the most recent. What are their crews saying? Hesitated. They're saying that orders shouldn't require them to watch innocent people die, that humanity closed its borders to make a point, not to become monsters. And what do you think? Helen asked quietly. I think we're asking our people to go against every instinct that makes them human, said, and I think that's a price that might be too high. Helen turned to face him. The New Hope sent distress calls for 6 hours. 6 hours, long enough to watch a movie, long enough to eat dinner, long enough for everyone on that ship to understand that no one was coming, that they didn't matter enough for anyone to help. I know, said quietly. So what do? We open our borders and go back to being the galaxy's unpaid servants. We teach the Council that human lives are negotiable, but theirs aren't. No, but maybe we find a middle ground. Maybe we enforce our borders but still answer distress calls. Maybe we show the galaxy that humans can be strong and compassionate at the same time. Helen looked out at the city again, millions of lights in the darkness, each one representing lives, families, dreams. She had closed Earth's borders to protect these people, to teach the galaxy that human lives mattered. But in doing so, had she asked humans to stop being human? She didn't know the answer. She only knew that somewhere out there, Captain Maya Torres was saving lives and probably destroying her career to do it. And Helen couldn't decide if that made Torres a hero or a traitor to everything Earth was trying to accomplish. 1 year after humanity closed its borders, Commander Ben stood in General Price's office and delivered news that neither of them wanted to hear. The holographic display between them showed the Dominion's fleet movements, and the picture was worse than their darkest predictions. They're not raiding anymore, Ben said quietly. They're conquering. 12 systems have fallen in the last 3 months. They are establishing permanent bases, taking slaves, and fortifying their positions. Studied the tactical map. Red markers showed controlled space expanding like a cancer through the galaxy. What's the Council's response? Chaos. Every species wants to protect their own territory first. They can't agree on a unified strategy. By the time they finish debating, they have taken another system. Ben highlighted a series of yellow markers. These are the core colonies. Based on current advancement rates, they'll reach Prime in 6 weeks. How many civilians on Prime? 4 billion. The number hung in the air between them. 4 billion lives. Thought about the New Hope's 50,000 and tried to imagine what 4 billion deaths would look like. He couldn't. The number was too big to process. What are our orders, General? Ben asked. Looked at the intelligence officer. Ben had been with him for 15 years. They had fought together, planned operations together, kept Earth safe together. Now Ben was asking a question they both knew the answer to but didn't want to say out loud. We observe, said finally. We monitor the situation and report to command. Earth's borders remain closed. Ben nodded slowly. Sir, permission to speak freely. Always. If Prime falls, if 4 billion civilians die while we watch, we become exactly what we accuse the Council of being. We become people who let children die because of politics. Felt like he'd been punched. The Council let our children die first. I know, and that was wrong, but being right doesn't make this easier, does it? Didn't answer. He just stared at the red markers on the map and wondered when doing the right thing had become so complicated. On Earth, President Helen Carter sat across from Speaker and felt nothing but cold anger. The elder had traveled to the edge of human space and requested this meeting personally. That alone showed how desperate the situation had become. Didn't leave his for anyone. They met on a neutral station, just the two of them and their security details. Looked older than she remembered. His glow was dim and his stone-like skin seemed cracked with stress. Madam President, I come to offer formal apologies for the Council's failure to respond to the New Hope's distress call, he said stiffly. It was a tragic error in judgment. Error in judgment, Helen repeated softly. Is that what you call watching 50,000 people die? It was wrong. I acknowledge this. The Council acknowledges this. We are prepared to offer substantial reparations and to welcome Earth back to full diplomatic relations. Helen leaned back in her chair. What changed? A year ago you told Ambassador that he was being emotional, that we needed time to reconsider. Now suddenly you're ready to apologize. His glow flickered. The galaxy has changed. The situation with the has become critical. So you need us, Helen said. You don't actually regret what happened, you just need human ships to fight your wars. That is not fair. Fair? Helen's voice hardened. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's fair. Fair is 3 council ships within range of a dying vessel, any one of which could have saved everyone on board. Fair is responding to distress calls regardless of which species is calling. Fair is treating human lives like they matter as much as anyone else's. We are offering you what you asked for, said desperately. Full council membership, equal voting rights, representation on the Security Council, everything you wanted. Not everything. Helen pulled out a data pad and slid it across the table. These are our terms for renewed relations. Read them. Scanned the document and his glow nearly went out completely. These demands are impossible. Joint command authority over any military operations involving human forces, mandatory response requirements to all distress calls, enforcement mechanisms with real penalties for violations. The Council will never agree to this. Then we're done here. Helen started to stand. Wait, looked at her with something that might have been fear. Madam President, please. 4 billion civilians are about to face surely you won't condemn them to death over politics. Helen sat back down slowly. I'm not condemning anyone. You are. You and every other council species that thinks human lives are negotiable while yours are sacred. So you will watch them die. You will let billions perish when you have the power to help. I don't know, Helen said honestly, and the truth of it made her feel sick. A year ago, I would have sent every ship we had without hesitation. I would have done it because it was the right thing to do, because saving lives matters more than politics. But you taught me a different lesson. You taught me that in the galaxy, power matters more than morality, that protecting your own interests comes first. So now I'm trying to decide if I should follow your example or be better than you were. Stared at her. You cannot mean this. Can't I? When the New Hope was dying, where was your compassion? Where was your concern for innocent lives? You had 6 hours to save them. 6 hours. And you chose not to act because it wasn't convenient, because it wasn't your priority, because following procedure mattered more than saving children. That was different. How? Explain to me how 50,000 humans matter less than 4 billion. I'm listening. Because if you can give me a good reason, if you can explain why council lives are more valuable than human lives, then maybe I'll understand why you think we should help you now. Opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. They both knew it. Go back to the council, Helen said quietly. Tell them our terms stand, full equality or nothing. They can have our help, but never again as convenient servants. Either we matter as much as any other species, or we don't matter at all. The council will refuse. These terms are too extreme. Then I guess you have a choice to make. You can let your pride cost 4 billion lives, or you can accept that you were wrong and treat us as equals. Helen stood. The choice is yours, but make it fast. You said 6 weeks, right? Left the meeting looking like a broken man. Helen watched his shuttle depart and felt no satisfaction. She felt tired and old and sick at heart. Her Secretary of State approached her. Madam President, do you really think the Council will refuse, even with 4 billion lives at stake? Yes, Helen said. Pride is a powerful thing, and they've spent centuries being the center of the galaxy. Accepting that humans are their equals means admitting they were wrong. Some species will choose to die rather than admit that. On the UES Vigilant, Captain Cross received classified orders that made his blood run cold. Admiral Hayes was mobilizing the fleet, not for defense, not for patrols, for a full-scale combat operation. What's the target? His first officer asked. No target yet, but Hayes is pulling every capital ship, every carrier, every destroyer we have. Whatever this is, it's big. Lieutenant Sophie Grant looked up from her sensor station. Sir, I'm picking up unusual activity at the Council border. It looks like their fleets are massing near space. Pulled up the tactical display. She was right. Dozens of Council ships were gathering, preparing for what looked like a major battle, and beyond them, red contacts marked the advance. How long until the reach prime? He asked. At current speed, 5 days. 5 days. Thought about Admiral Hayes mobilizing the fleet. He thought about President Carter meeting with. He thought about 4 billion civilians who had no idea whether anyone would come to save them. Sir, are we going to help them? Sophie asked quietly. I don't know, said honestly. I really don't know. Ambassador Lyra stood in an emergency council session and watched her government tear itself apart. Speaker had just presented Earth's terms, and the reaction was exactly what she had feared. "Impossible," a delegate shouted. "We cannot give humans equal authority over military operations. They're too young, too aggressive." "Too aggressive?" Lyra stood up. "They're offering to save 4 billion of my people, and you're worried about them being aggressive." "These terms would fundamentally change the power structure of the Council," another voice argued. "We would be negotiating from a position of weakness." "We are in a position of weakness," Lyra said coldly. "They are winning. Our fleets can't stop them. And the only species with the military capability to help is the one we betrayed a year ago. We offered apologies. We offered reparations. What more do they want?" "Respect," Lyra said simply. "They want to be treated as equals. They want their lives to matter as much as ours. Is that really too much to ask?" The debate raged for hours. Some species supported accepting Earth's terms, others refused on principle. By the time the vote was called, Lyra already knew the result. The Council rejected Earth's conditions by a narrow margin. They would not grant humans equal authority. They would not accept binding enforcement of mutual aid requirements. They would maintain the existing power structure even if it meant facing the alone. Lyra walked out of the chamber in a daze. Her aide, a young named, caught up with her. "Ambassador, what do we do now?" "Now we pray," Lyra said quietly. "We pray that humans are better than we are, that they'll help us even though we don't deserve it. Because if they're not, if they follow our example and put their pride above innocent lives, then 4 billion people on Maya are going to die." She looked up at the stars visible through the station's dome. Somewhere out there, Earth was making its decision. And for the first time in her long life, Lyra understood what it meant to be truly helpless. 5 days until the reached prime. President Helen Carter stood in the White House Situation Room surrounded by advisors, military commanders, and voices all saying different things. The debate had been going for 3 hours, and they were no closer to a decision. "We can't just watch 4 billion people die," Senator Foster said for what felt like the 100th time. "It doesn't matter what the Council did to us. This is about innocent civilians. If we help them now, we validate their belief that human lives don't matter," Defense Secretary Martin Cole argued. "We teach them that they can ignore us when it's convenient and call us when they need us. Nothing changes." Admiral Richard Hayes sat quietly at the table, studying tactical displays. He hadn't spoken yet, and Helen knew he was waiting for the right moment. Hayes didn't waste words. "What do you think, Admiral?" she asked finally. Hayes looked up from his data pad. "Madam President, from a purely military standpoint, we can stop our fleet is ready. We have tactical advantages they don't expect. We could save Prime." He paused. "But you didn't ask me if we could, you're asking if we should." "And that's not a military question. That's a question about who we are." Helen looked around the table. "So who are we? Are we the species that stands by and watches while billions die, or are we the species that helps even when we've been hurt?" Jake spoke up. The former ambassador had been recalled to serve as an advisor on council relations. "Madam President, I walked out of that council chamber a year ago because I was done watching humans be treated as expendable. Nothing has changed. They rejected your terms. They're willing to die rather than admit we're their equals." "So we let them?" Helen asked quietly. "I don't know," Jake said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I keep thinking about the New Hope, about those 6 hours, about parents holding their children and waiting for someone to save them, and I think about how betrayed they must have felt when they realized no one was coming. And now we're doing the same thing to said." "No," Jake said sharply. "We're not doing the same thing. The Council had 3 ships nearby and chose not to help. We're 4,000 light-years away, still dealing with our own pain and being asked to risk our lives for people who wouldn't do the same for us." "But we're better than them," insisted. "We have to be." Helen closed her eyes. She thought about Emma Grant, 6 weeks old, dying in space while the galaxy ignored her mother's screams for help. She thought about 12,000 children who would never grow up. She thought about the choice she had to make and what it would mean either way. "Admiral Hayes, if we deploy the fleet, what are our casualties likely to be?" "Moderate to heavy. They are vicious fighters. We'll lose ships. We'll lose people. I'm estimating 2,000 to 5,000 casualties minimum. 2,000 to 5,000 human lives to save 4 billion. The math was simple. But math didn't account for principle, for justice, for the fact that Earth had already paid in blood for a galaxy that didn't value them. I need to think, Helen said. We reconvene in 1 hour. The room cleared, leaving Helen alone with her thoughts. She walked to the window and looked out at Washington. Millions of people going about their lives, trusting her to make the right choice. But what was right? Her phone rang. It was a private line, one that very few people had access to. She answered it without looking at the caller ID. Helen, it's Lyra. Ambassador Lyra. They had spoken a few times over the past year, unofficial conversations that both sides pretended weren't happening. Lyra had been one of the few council members who openly criticized their handling of the New Hope. I shouldn't be talking to you, Helen said. I know, but I needed to tell you something. Lyra's voice was steady but sad. The council voted. They rejected your terms. I know, told me. What you don't know is that I tried. I stood in that chamber and begged them to accept. I told them that pride was costing us everything, but they wouldn't listen. Lyra took a breath. Helen, I'm not calling to ask you to save us. I'm calling to tell you that whatever you decide, I understand. We failed you. We let your children die. And if you choose to let the take prime, if you choose to follow our example, I can't say you're wrong. Helen felt tears on her face. 4 billion people, Lyra, 4 billion. I know, and I've been thinking about them constantly, thinking about the children who don't understand what's coming, thinking about families saying goodbye, thinking about all the lives that will end because my government was too proud to admit a mistake. Lyra's voice broke. And I've been thinking about your children too, the ones on the New Hope, the ones we let die. I wake up every night thinking about them. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know that some of us understand what we did. Some of us carry that weight. And because I want you to know that whatever happens, I won't blame you. You tried to teach us a lesson. We chose not to learn it. The consequences are on us. The call ended. Helen stood at the window for a long time, thinking about children who would never grow up, about parents who couldn't save them, about a galaxy that was about to learn what its choices cost. When the meeting reconvened, Helen had made her decision. Deploy the fleet, she said quietly. Full engagement authorization, we're going to save Prime. The room erupted. Some people cheered, others protested. Senator looked relieved, Jake looked betrayed. Madam President, this goes against everything we've been fighting for, Defense Secretary Cole said. No, Helen said firmly. We closed our borders to teach the Council that human lives matter, that our children's death should have consequences, and they learned that lesson. The galaxy has spent a year realizing what they lost when they pushed us away. They've seen what happens when humans aren't there to help. They've suffered for their choice just like we suffered for theirs. She stood up. But if we let 4 billion people die when we have the power to save them, we don't prove that human lives matter. We prove that we're just like them, that we only care about our own. And I refuse to let the Council's failure turn us into monsters. So we just forgive them? Jake asked bitterly. No, we show them who we are. We show them that humans don't let children die, even when we've been hurt, even when we're angry, even when we have every reason to walk away. And then, when those 4 billion people are safe, when the galaxy has seen what we're capable of, we remind them that they owe us, that this debt can never be repaid, that they will spend the rest of their existence knowing that human compassion saved them when their own pride nearly destroyed them. Admiral Hayes stood. I'll give the orders. The fleet will be ready to deploy in 6 hours. One more thing, Helen said. I want it made clear to every species watching this unfold. Earth is not rejoining the Council under their old terms. We're doing this as an independent action. We're saving Prime because it's right, not because the Council asked us to. And when it's over, our borders remain closed until they accept our conditions for renewed relations. They might still refuse, said. Then they're idiots, but at least they'll be alive to make that choice. The fleet that emerged from human space 3 hours later was the largest military force Earth had ever assembled. 300 ships, led by Admiral Hayes aboard the UES Washington. Capital ships, carriers, destroyers, support vessels. The full might of humanity's military, deployed not in conquest, but in defense of people who had betrayed them. Captain Maya Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Resolution and felt pride surge through her. She had been reprimanded for saving that family 6 months ago. Now she was being asked to save an entire world. The irony wasn't lost on her. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes, the communication channel crackled. We're not doing this for the Council. We're not doing this for politics. We're doing this because 4 billion lives matter, because their children matter. Remember that when the fighting starts. The fleet was massive, 3 times the size of the Council forces desperately trying to defend Prime. But the commanders had made a critical error. They had assumed the humans would stay neutral. They had assumed wrong. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, perfectly coordinated, the galaxy watched in shock. Species who had dismissed humanity as emotional newcomers suddenly saw what those emotions could accomplish when channeled into purpose. The battle was brutal. They fought like demons, but they had never faced an opponent like humanity before. Human ships moved with precision born from a year of intensive training. Human tactics adapted in real time to enemy movements. Human weapons, designed during months of isolation, tore through shields with devastating efficiency. Captain Cross led his squadron against a capital ship 3 times the size of the Vigilant. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Sophie Grant, targeted weak points with surgical precision. Around them, human and Council forces fought side by side, protecting each other's flanks, covering retreats, fighting as the unified force they should have been all along. Lieutenant Chris Morgan, serving on Maya's ship, found himself protecting a destroyer that had lost shields. He thought about the family Maya had saved, about the children who were now teenagers somewhere safe. He thought about the New Hope and the children who had died in space, and he fought to make sure no more children died today. They began to retreat after 6 hours of combat. Their fleet was shattered, their command structure in chaos. They had expected an easy victory against a divided galaxy. Instead, they had learned what humans were capable of when someone threatened innocence. As the last ships fled into hyperspace, Prime remained safe. 4 billion people who had been hours from death were now watching human ships patrol their skies, ensuring no enemies returned. The cost had been high. 18 human ships destroyed, 3,214 dead, but 4 billion lived. Admiral Hayes received a transmission from the planetary government. They were requesting permission to send a delegation to thank him personally. He almost refused, then thought better of it. Tell them I'll meet with their civilian leaders only. No council representatives, no politicians, just ordinary people who want to say thank you. An hour later, Hayes stood in a shuttle bay and watched a small craft land. The doors opened and families emerged. Parents holding children, elderly leaning on younger ones, teachers with groups of students, ordinary people who had been terrified and were now safe. A young woman approached him. She was holding a child, maybe 3 years old in human terms. Admiral Hayes, I wanted you to meet my daughter. Her name is Emma. Hayes felt something break inside him. Emma. Yes, I named her after the human child who died on the New Hope, the youngest victim. I wanted to remember her, to honor her. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you to know that some of us never forgot what happened to your people. Some of us have been ashamed every day since then. Hayes looked at the child named Emma and thought about the human Emma who had died at 6 weeks old. He thought about all the children on both sides, the ones who died and the ones who lived because someone chose to act. Thank you, he said quietly, for remembering her. 1 week after the battle, President Helen Carter received a communication from Speaker. The elder appeared on her screen looking older than ever. Madam President, the Council has voted again on your proposed terms for renewed diplomatic relations. This time, the vote was unanimous. We accept your conditions, all of them. Helen had been expecting this, but it still felt surreal. Just like that, after you said it was impossible. You saved 4 billion lives when you had every reason to let them die. You showed us what humanity is capable of, both militarily and morally. You taught us that strength and compassion are not opposites. Glow brightened slightly. We were wrong about everything, and we are prepared to spend the rest of our existence making that right. The families of the New Hope victims receive full reparations, Helen said. Every child's name is memorialized at the Council headquarters, and every year on the anniversary of their deaths, the Council observes a day of remembrance, not just for them, but for all victims of indifference. Agreed, all of it. One more thing. Earth ships will have full access to Council space, but Council ships entering human space must request permission every single time. No exceptions, not until trust is rebuilt. Understood. After signed off, Helen sat alone in her office. They had won. Humanity was now a full equal in the Galactic Council, with power and respect they had never had before. but the price had been 50,000 lives and a year of isolation that had nearly broken them. Jake entered without knocking. He stood in front of her desk and said nothing for a long moment. "You're angry," Helen said. "I'm conflicted. We closed our borders to prove a point, to show them consequences, and then we saved them anyway. We saved 4 billion innocents. There's a difference." "Is there? Or did we just teach them that humans will always come to rescue them, no matter what they do to us?" Helen stood and walked to the window. "No, we taught them something more important. We taught them that human compassion is stronger than human anger, that we're capable of holding people accountable while still protecting their innocence, that we can be better than they were without being weak." "And what did we teach ourselves?" Helen thought about that for a long time. "We taught ourselves that closing our borders was necessary, that standing up for our value was right. But we also taught ourselves that isolation isn't victory, that being strong doesn't mean being cruel, and that sometimes the hardest choice is the right one, even when it hurts." Jake was quiet, then nodded slowly. "The families of the New Hope, do you think they'll be satisfied with this?" "No, nothing will bring their children back. But maybe knowing that their deaths changed the galaxy, that they forced the Council to see humans as equals, maybe that gives their loss some meaning." Months later, Maya Torres visited the memorial for the New Hope on Earth. 50,000 names etched in black stone, including 12,000 in a special section for the children. She placed flowers at the base, just like she had before. Lieutenant Chris Morgan joined her like he always did. "Captain, do you think it was worth it, everything we went through?" Maya looked at the names, running her fingers over the cold stone. Emma Grant, 6 weeks old. Daniel Park, 3 years old. Sophie Miller, 8 years old. Children who would never grow up, who had died while the galaxy looked away. "The Council finally understands what we tried to tell them," she said quietly. "That every life matters, that human lives matter. Our people didn't die for nothing if their deaths taught the galaxy that lesson." She turned to face Chris. "But we also learned something. We learned that becoming like them, letting anger turn us cold, that would have meant they won. They failed us and we made them face that failure. But in the end, we chose to be better than they were, and that's what makes us human." Above them, ships moved through Earth's sky. Human vessels heading out on patrol, working alongside Council forces now, but as equals. The isolation was over. The borders were open. But humanity had emerged different, stronger, no longer the eager newcomers seeking acceptance, but equal partners who had proven their worth through courage and compassion. In the end, the Council had learned to fear not humanity's weapons or their anger, but their moral strength. They had learned that humans would close every diplomatic door when betrayed, would stand alone when necessary, would let the galaxy suffer the consequences of its choices. But they had also learned that when innocent lives hung in the balance, humans would kick those doors back open, not because they had to, but because it was right. And that made all the difference.